The rust-colored landscape of Kepler 452b stretched out like an endless canvas of dried blood and broken dreams. Researcher J. Park moved carefully, her environmental suit protecting her from the planet's harsh atmosphere. The scanning device, in her hand, beeped softly, tracking unusual energy signatures that had drawn her research team to this remote corner of the galaxy. Something moved in the distance. At first, Jay thought it was a trick of the light, a shimmer of heat rising from the rocky terrain. But then the shimmer took shape. A figure, humanoid, but not human, not like anything she had ever seen before. The alien woman stood perfectly, still. Her body seemed to blend with the surrounding rocks, a living camouflage that would have made her invisible to any less observant explorer. Large eyes, silvery and reflective like polished mirrors, locked onto Jay with an intensity that stopped her in her tracks. Fear radiated from the alien in waves. Not the kind of fear that comes from immediate danger, but a deep, historical terror that seemed to have roots stretching back generations. Jay could see the woman's hands trembling, her body tense like a creature caught between fight and flight. "I mean no harm," Jay said softly, raising her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Her translation device hummed, converting her words into a series of clicks and low-frequency sounds that might communicate her intent. The alien woman took a step back, then another. Her skin, if it could be called skin, began to shift colors, moving from the rocky brown of the landscape to a pale, almost translucent white. It was a biological response Jay had never witnessed before, a living camouflage that spoke of evolutionary adaptations far beyond human understanding. Jay's training kicked in. First contact protocols: stay calm, show no aggression, create a sense of safety. But something about this encounter felt different. The woman's terror seemed to go beyond the typical response of an unknown species encountering humans for the first time. "Why are you afraid?" Jay asked, her voice calm and steady. The alien didn't respond with words. Back at the research base, Wong Kim hunched over a collection of damaged data crystals. His fingers moved carefully, connecting fragile fragments of information that seemed to dance between clarity and mystery. The crystals, recovered from various alien archives, held snippets of communication that made no sense individually, but hinted at something larger. Jay entered the room, her environmental suit still dusty from the planet's surface. She watched Wong work, knowing he had a rare talent for piecing together complicated puzzles. The research station hummed with quiet energy, its advanced systems processing countless streams of information. "Look at this," Wong muttered, his eyes never leaving the holographic display. Fragments of text flickered, some in human languages, others in complex alien communication codes. Each fragment seemed to tell a small part of a larger story. One crystal showed a transmission from nearly 2 centuries ago, damaged but partially readable. Something about a human intervention in a conflict that had threatened multiple alien civilizations. But the details were frustratingly incomplete. Jay leaned closer. The transmission mentioned something about human adaptability. Not just technological adaptability, but something more profound. A quality that seemed to transcend normal biological limitations. Another crystal showed a star map. Multiple civilization markers were clustered around what seemed to be a region of space where humans had been active. But the markers were marked with unusual symbols, not indicators of conflict, but something more complex. "These aren't war records," Wong said, his voice filled with excitement. "These are something else." The research station's main computer began correlating the data. Patterns emerged, subtle connections that suggested a narrative far more interesting than simple exploration or conflict. Something about humans that the alien civilizations found both terrifying and fascinating. Outside the station's reinforced windows, Kepler 452b's landscape continued its ancient, unchanging dance. The planet seemed to hold secrets of its own, mirroring the mysterious fragments they were discovering. A low-frequency signal began to pulse through the station's communication systems. It matched none of the known alien communication protocols they had studied. Something was trying to communicate, or perhaps trying to be understood. Wong's hands moved faster now, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Each movement revealed another layer of the mysterious transmission. Bits of information that seemed random at first began to form a more coherent picture. Jay remembered the alien woman's terror. Those eyes that held something more than simple fear. Now these fragments seemed to explain something about that moment. Something fundamental about how alien civilizations viewed humanity. The research station's AI began to generate potential translation models, but each attempt seemed to fall short. Whatever was contained in these fragments was beyond simple language translation. It was a complex narrative that required more than words to understand. One crystal showed a series of coordinates, star systems, where humans had made contact. But the markers were not like typical exploration notes. They seemed to indicate something more, moments of profound interaction that went beyond simple discovery. "This doesn't make sense," Wong whispered, "but it feels important." The station's lights flickered momentarily. The communication systems pulsed with an energy that felt almost alive. Something was trying to be understood. Something that had been hidden for generations. Jay touched one of the data crystals. It was warm, almost vibrating with contained information. The alien woman's face flashed in her mind. Those mirror-like eyes that held generations of memory. Whatever was happening, it was clear that this was more than a simple research mission. They were uncovering something that could change everything. Humans understood about their place in the universe. The fragments continued to dance, waiting to be understood, waiting to reveal their secret. The research station fell silent. Wong and Jay stared at the holographic display, watching as hidden layers of information slowly revealed themselves. The data crystals pulsed with an energy that seemed almost alive, telling a story that went beyond simple scientific records. Elia, the alien woman from the planet's surface, had been transferred to a specially designed observation room. Her body continued to shift colors, adapting to the station's environment like a living chameleon. The station's scientists watched her carefully, their monitoring systems struggling to understand her unique biological structure. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. One of the damaged data crystals suddenly projected a three-dimensional historical map. Star systems connected by thin lines of light, showing a complex network of interactions that predated human space exploration by centuries. The map revealed something extraordinary. Humans were not just visitors or explorers in these star systems, they were something else entirely. Wong discovered the first significant clue. A series of diplomatic records that showed humans solving conflicts not through military power, but through an unprecedented ability to understand and adapt. Where other civilizations saw barriers, humans saw bridges. In one recorded interaction, humans had mediated a 100-year war between two alien species by introducing a completely unexpected solution. They didn't use weapons or technology. They used understanding. Jay's hands trembled as she analyzed the data. The record suggested that human empathy was not a weakness, as many alien civilizations believed, but an extraordinary tool of communication and resolution. The observation room where Elia sat began to change. Her body's color-shifting mechanism synchronized with the holographic displays, creating a living interface of communication. She was not just a passive subject. She was participating in the discovery. Historical records showed multiple instances where human interventions had prevented total civilizational collapses, not through force but through a unique ability to see connections where others saw only differences. One record detailed a complex conflict involving 6 different alien species. Traditional diplomatic methods had failed for generations. Humans arrived and within months created a framework of understanding that ended centuries of tension. The station's AI began generating complex models, trying to quantify this human quality. But traditional measurement systems failed. How do you measure empathy? How do you calculate the impact of genuine understanding? Elia moved for the first time since being brought to the station. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She was communicating something beyond words. Her body told a story of generations of fear, slowly transforming into something else. Wong noticed something strange happening to the data crystals. They were no longer just storing information. They seemed to be actively processing the new revelations, reshaping themselves to accommodate this deeper understanding. The human quality they were discovering was not about technological superiority. It was about something more fundamental: the ability to genuinely connect, to see beyond immediate differences and find common ground. Jay remembered the moment on the planet's surface. The alien woman's initial terror. Now it made sense. This was not fear of destruction. This was fear of being truly seen, of having generations of misunderstanding suddenly stripped away. The station's systems began to pulse with a new frequency. The data crystals glowed with an internal light. Ilya's body synchronized with the displays, creating a living, breathing communication network. Something fundamental was changing. Not just in their understanding of humans, but in the very way different civilizations might understand each other. The deeper truth was emerging, slowly, carefully, transforming everything they thought they knew about connection, understanding, and the complex dance of interstellar relationships. And at the center of this transformation was something surprisingly simple: human empathy. The research station continued its quiet work, unaware that it was witnessing the beginning of a profound, cosmic revelation. The observation room hummed with tension. Jay sat across from Elia, a transparent barrier between them, not for protection but as a symbolic boundary of communication. Wong watched from a side console, monitoring every minute detail of their interaction. Elia's body continued its remarkable color shifts, now moving in complex patterns that seemed to mirror her internal emotional state. Her large silvery eyes locked onto Jay with an intensity that felt like looking into the depths of an entire civilization's memory. "Why are you afraid?" Jay asked again, her voice calm and steady. The translation devices struggled. Elia's response wasn't just language. It was a combination of color changes, subtle body movements, and low-frequency vibrations that carried emotional content beyond words. Fragments of understanding began to emerge. Generations of stories. Legends passed down about humans. Not as conquerors or invaders, but as something far more complex and unexpected. Wong's monitoring systems captured something extraordinary. Elia was not just responding. She was actively sharing a collective memory, a living transmission of her species' accumulated experiences with humanity. Images flickered on the research station's screens, moments of human intervention in complex galactic conflicts, not through violence but through an unprecedented ability to understand and connect. Humans had solved problems that had seemed impossible to other civilizations. One memory showed a human diplomat resolving a 100-year conflict between two warring species, not through weapons or technological superiority, but through genuine empathy and creative problem-solving. Another memory revealed humans sharing resources with a dying civilization, sacrificing their own comfort to help strangers who were completely different from them. It was a level of compassion that defied typical survival instincts. Elia's body began to pulse with a rhythmic pattern. She was communicating something fundamental about human nature that went beyond simple cultural exchange. A quality that challenged everything her civilization believed about intelligent life. Jay remained still. She understood that this was more than a scientific encounter. This was a moment of profound cultural translation. The station's systems struggled to process the complex information. Elia was sharing not just memories but entire emotional landscapes. Generations of accumulated understanding were being transmitted in a language that was part biological, part emotional, part historical. Wong watched in amazement as the monitoring systems captured something unprecedented. Elia's communication was breaking down traditional barriers of interspecies communication. She was showing, not telling. The fear that had initially defined their encounter was transforming. What had begun as terror was becoming something else. Curiosity, understanding, a dawning recognition of something unexpected. Humans were not what her civilization had imagined. They were something entirely different. a species defined not by technological power, but by an extraordinary capacity for empathy and adaptation. One particular memory stood out. A human research team had discovered a dying ecosystem on a distant planet. Instead of studying it scientifically, they had dedicated years to healing and restoration, not for personal gain, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Jay felt the weight of this transmission. Generations of misunderstanding were being dissolved in this single moment of genuine communication. The observation room's temperature seemed to shift. The transparent barrier between Jay and Elia felt less like a separation and more like a window of understanding. Elia's body stopped shifting colors. She remained a soft, almost translucent silver, a color of calm, of understanding, of a barrier being slowly, carefully dismantled. Something profound was happening, not just a first contact scenario, but a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could mean. The research station continued its quiet work, unaware that it was witnessing a moment that could reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The twin suns of Kepler 452b were setting, painting the research station's windows with deep orange and crimson light. Jay and Elia stood together, no longer separated by fear or misunderstanding. Something had changed, not just between them, but in the fundamental way their two species might understand each other. Wong watched from the monitoring station, his hands frozen over the communication panels. The data streams showed something unprecedented, a living dialogue that went beyond traditional communication methods. Elia's body no longer shifted colors in terror. Instead, her skin moved in smooth, deliberate patterns, a language of its own. She was showing Jay memories of her civilization, not just events, but emotional landscapes that humans had never witnessed before. One memory revealed a planet on the brink of total ecological collapse. A human research team had arrived, not to study or exploit, but to help. They spent years rebuilding complex ecosystem networks, asking nothing in return. This act of pure compassion had transformed an entire civilization's understanding of human nature. Another memory showed a complex diplomatic crisis involving multiple alien species. Where traditional negotiation had failed for generations, humans introduced a completely unexpected approach. They didn't use force or technological superiority. They used understanding. The research station's systems struggled to process the information. This was more than data. This was a profound cultural exchange happening at a level beyond words. Jay realized something fundamental was occurring. The initial terror Elia had experienced was dissolving, replaced by a complex emotional spectrum: curiosity, respect, and a dawning recognition of something extraordinary. Humans were not what her civilization had imagined. They were something entirely unexpected. Wung's monitoring systems began to generate new communication models. Traditional translation algorithms collapsed. What was happening here went beyond language. It was a direct transmission of collective experience. Outside, Kepler 452b's landscape continued its ancient, unchanging dance. Rock formations that had witnessed countless generations stood as silent witnesses to this moment of transformation. Elia reached out, not with her hands, but with a complex biological signal that carried emotional content. She was sharing her civilization's accumulated knowledge about humans, not as invaders or competitors, but as a unique form of intelligent life defined by an extraordinary capacity for empathy. The research station's lights pulsed in synchronization with their communication. Something was happening that went beyond scientific observation. This was a moment of genuine connection. One memory stood out clearly. A human medical team had traveled across multiple star systems to help a dying alien civilization, risking everything without expecting any reward. Such acts of pure compassion were incomprehensible to many alien species. Jay felt the weight of these memories. Generations of misunderstanding were being dissolved in this single moment of genuine communication. Wung realized they were witnessing something historic. Not just a first contact scenario, but a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could mean. The transformation was subtle but profound. Fear was being replaced by understanding. Suspicion was giving way to curiosity. As Kepler 452b's suns finally disappeared below the horizon, Jay and Elia continued their extraordinary dialogue. Two beings from different worlds, connected by a moment of profound revelation. The research station hummed with quiet energy. Something fundamental had changed, not just in their understanding of each other, but in the very way different civilizations might communicate and coexist. And at the center of this transformation was something surprisingly simple: the extraordinary, human capacity for genuine understanding. The universe watched, waiting to see what might happen next. Instead, a low humming sound emerged from her body, a vibration that seemed to carry emotional content beyond simple language. It was a sound of memory, of history, of something profound that words could not capture. Jay took a careful step forward. The scanning device in her hand continued to register strange energy readings. Whatever was happening here was more than a simple first contact scenario. Something deeper was at play. The landscape around them seemed to hold its breath. Kepler 452b's twin suns hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the rocky ground. In the distance, rock formations that looked almost like petrified trees stood as silent witnesses to this moment. The alien woman's eyes never left Jay. They were not the eyes of a simple creature. They held intelligence, memory, and something else. A complexity that suggested layers of understanding far beyond what Jay had been prepared to encounter. Minutes passed. Neither moved. The only sound was the soft beeping of Jay's equipment and the low, almost musical humming coming from the alien woman's body. Then, suddenly, a change. The terror in the woman's eyes shifted, not disappeared, but transformed, from pure fear to something more nuanced, curiosity, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Jay knew she was experiencing something extraordinary. This was not just a meeting between two different species. This was a moment that could potentially rewrite everything humans understood about life in the universe. The scanning device beeped again, a more intense signal. Something was happening, something that went beyond the physical realm of scientific observation. The alien woman took a single step forward,